A boy was playing video games on his computer. He had been a NEET for 10 years. The next morning, he went downstairs and sat at the table for lunch. His mother asked if he had found a job because his father wouldn't be able to work forever. She also asked what his plan was for when they were no longer around. Hearing this, he got upset and angrily told her that she was being annoying. She replied that he always said, I've got it, but nothing ever changed. Frustrated, he stood up and said he lost his appetite, then started to walk away. He knew he was acting wrong, but after graduating from high school, he went on to an average university and graduated. Things weren't too bad at first, but that's when his problems began. He tried hard to find a good job even before graduating, but he failed to get one, which caused him to lose all his motivation. He started receiving messages from friends saying they'd gotten job offers. When they asked him about his situation, he felt disappointed and ignored their questions. As he walked upstairs, his mother mentioned their neighbor who had a successful job and even an adorable child now. Suddenly, a courier arrived with a package. The boy went to the door and was shocked to see the parcel. His mother came over, curious, and asked if he was buying things even though he didn't have any money. He quickly said that he probably won a prize again because he hadn't bought anything. He often entered online giveaways to distract himself from the guilt of not having a job, but sometimes he received adult items which he couldn't let his parents see. That's why he went ahead to confirm the delivery himself. The courier asked if he would sign for the package, and the boy noticed the courier giving him a strange look. He wondered if it was because a man in his 30s was home in the middle of a weekday. Looking around, he saw that other people were also staring at him more boldly than usual. The parcel was small and his mother glanced at it, wondering if it was some kind of food, and then walked away. He went into his room, opened the parcel, and found a note and a disc inside. The disc had the title, Village of Fate, written on it, and he wondered if it was some kind of game. He read the note, which explained that he had been chosen to test the game. The note said that the game had the latest AI technology and was the first in the world to create characters that could think and act like real humans. He thought that sounded a bit exaggerated. He continued reading the game's description and the rules. One of the conditions was that he had to promise not to share any details about the game online. He found it strange that there wasn't any official agreement, and the promise just seemed like a basic contract. Another rule was that he needed to stay connected to the internet while playing, and if the villagers in the game died, he wouldn't be able to play the game ever again. That rule surprised him, and he thought it was a little harsh. Curious, he searched the name Village of Fate online but didn't find any results. He started to wonder if the game might be full of viruses, so he decided to play it on his old PC. If it turned out to be a prank, he figured he could share the story as a joke on Reddit. When he inserted the disc, the game's title appeared on the screen. He pressed enter to start, and that's when the first scene appeared. He was shocked by the incredibly high-definition graphics, better than anything he had ever seen. He saw some villagers riding in a carriage, and suddenly, monsters attacked them. He wondered if the villagers were about to be hunted. A girl holding a holy book kept repeating God of Fate as if she was praying for help. He moved his cursor, thinking that the monsters were going to take down the horse. Suddenly, the man driving the carriage tried to defend it, and a bright light began shining from the holy book. Within seconds, the whole screen was filled with light. Confused about what had just happened, the next scene showed the villagers happily talking to each other while standing in the middle of the forest. He realized that this was probably where the actual game was about to begin. He moved the cursor over the characters and could see their background stories. The man driving the carriage was named Gams, a 26-year-old swordsman. The girl with the holy book was named Chem, a 19-year-old priestess who believed in the god of fate. She was Gam's younger sister. He noticed that they didn't look alike and started to wonder if the game was made in Japan, thinking it must have been very expensive to produce. With such high-quality CG, he thought it should be a hot topic online, but decided to check that later. He was more curious to see the descriptions of the other characters. He checked the remaining 3 characters and realized they were all part of the same family. Finding this interesting, he started wondering what the game's controls were. So he began looking for the instruction paper again. He also noticed that the game wasn't fully voiced, as the conversations appeared in text on the screen. In the game, Gams apologized to the others, explaining that it was his job to protect the village, but all he could do during the monster attack was give them a chance to escape. Carol, his little sister, happily asked him about the bright light they had just seen. Chem, Gam's other sister, told Carol that Gams was her big brother. The boy playing the game noticed that Gams was handsome, strong, and had a beautiful sister, so he thought Gams must be the main character. Gams then told Chem that it was childish to treat Carol like that, and Chem apologized. Carol giggled, seeing her sister get scolded. The boy started to enjoy the game, as he really liked the characters' personalities and backgrounds. Layla and Rhodus, the other characters, also wondered about the light. Chem explained that the mysterious light had come from the Bible she was holding. The boy then received instructions that he had to write a prophecy for the villagers every day. He had now become the god of the game and was responsible for guiding the villagers to prosperity. When he read the instructions, he was stunned and couldn't fully understand them at first. He thought the game might only be able to recognize simple sentences or words, so he wrote a sentence, thinking that if the AI could even understand a small part of it, it would be an amazing game. After he wrote the prophecy and pressed enter, a light appeared on the Bible. The girl, Chem, opened it and started reading, telling the others they had received a prophecy from the god of fate. Everyone got excited and started praying. Since no one except Chem could read, they asked her to read the prophecy for them. Chem read aloud a command to harvest trees and secure a place to live, all phrased in a prophecy-like way. The boy was completely shocked. He pulled back from his chair in disbelief. He hadn't expected it to work so perfectly. Seeing the characters understand and respond to what he wrote left him amazed, and he couldn't believe that technology like this existed. He thought to himself that if the characters could understand and react like that, then this game was truly unbelievable. He thought for a moment that the characters might just be following some pre-programmed actions, but then he noticed they were discussing how to harvest trees and secure a place to sleep. Rhodus mentioned they could cut down trees from the forest, but they wouldn't be able to use the wood as timber right away because it needed time to dry after being cut. Chem was surprised to learn this, and even the boy playing the game was shocked as he didn't know about that process either. Rhodus then explained how drying wood worked, and Chem, feeling a bit guilty, said she hadn't researched about that before. The boy also thought the same, realizing he didn't know much about it either. Rhodus then reassured everyone, saying there must be a reason behind God's plan, so there was no harm in cutting down the trees and letting them dry. With that, they gathered their tools and headed towards the trees to start working. The boy realized that Gams and Rhodus were in charge of harvesting the trees while the girls were walking around looking for anything edible. He noticed he could use the scroll wheel on his mouse to zoom in and out of the scene. As he zoomed out, he saw a long, narrow area in the distance and guessed it might be the path they'd used to escape on the carriage earlier. He started to wonder how he could progress the game and whether it might actually be running in real time. He couldn't believe it and thought to himself that it was impossible for a game like this to exist. Suddenly, an explanation about fate points appeared on the screen. These points were granted based on how much the villagers felt indebted to the god of fate, which was him. He noticed that he currently had 97 points, and these points could be used to bring about miracles. The instructions explained that the more residents he had, the more fate points he would earn, and making the villagers happy would also increase his points. Curious, he looked at the list of miracles he could perform. Some of them included helping the escaped villagers reunite, or causing a traveling peddler or doctor to show up. He realized he could influence people's fate, but not control them directly. However, he could control things like the weather, which made him feel powerful, almost like a god. Unsure where to spend his limited points, he decided to listen closely to the villagers' conversation to decide how best to use them. He scrolled over to Gams and Rhodus and noticed that Rhodus was trying to talk to Gams, but Gams wasn't saying much. Curious about what the girls were discussing, he shifted the screen to them and saw they were talking about food. He thought summoning a peddler might be helpful since they could buy food from him. The villagers mentioned they only had food for 2 weeks and heard that he thought he should consider instructing Gams to go investigate that area tomorrow. But then he hesitated, wondering if it was a good idea to send their only fighter away from the group. Instead, he thought about using Carol, who wasn't doing much, to explore and expand the visible area. Just then, Carol picked up a mushroom and Layla quickly told her to drop it because it was poisonous. Seeing the situation, the boy thought to himself that if his careless actions led to the villagers' downfall, he'd feel guilty. He wondered if there was another miracle he could use to help. He spotted a miracle called Familiar and considered whether using it might expand the visible area of the map. But then, he stressed over the fact that even a simple dog or cat would cost 300 fate points, which he couldn't afford. As he lowered his head, feeling the pressure over a mere game, he noticed there was another option to increase fate points: a payment system. He realized that he could get 10 fate points by paying 1,000 yen, which frustrated him as a NEET because he wasn't earning any money. He figured that if he spent 20,000 yen, he could get a cat or dog, and with enough points, he could ensure the villagers lived a comfortable life. But then, he checked his bank account, and he saw he only had 10,852 yen. He started thinking about selling his books, games, and unopened prizes online to get more money. After thinking this over, he returned his focus to the game and noticed that the villagers were preparing to sleep at 9 o'clock. Rodas asked Gams why he wasn't going to bed, and Gams replied that someone had to stay awake in case a monster appeared. Rodas reassured him, saying that with the power of God, no monsters would come near them. The boy realized how much trust the villagers had placed in him, but he knew he didn't have those kinds of powers. He thought about telling them that their god wasn't all-powerful and had limitations, but worried that doing so might weaken their faith and gratitude towards him. He started looking at how wood was processed in the game and thought about how long it had been since he had paid attention to anything like that. Lately, all he did was watch entertainment videos or scroll through funny posts on Reddit. He wondered if he wasn't a NEET, maybe he could give the villagers an easier, more comfortable life. Suddenly, he stood up, realizing he was regretting his past over a game. He thought games were supposed to be just for fun, not something that made him feel bad. As he sat back down, he felt a sharp pain in the scar of his stomach, which brought back a painful memory. He remembered when his little sister was in danger and he got into a fight with a boy on the street. That boy stabbed him in the stomach with a knife. At that moment, he had left something important behind and ran for it, and that's when everything started going downhill. With sadness in his eyes, he stood up from his chair, thinking he just wanted to lose himself in gaming because he felt like there was nothing else left for him to do. The next morning, he opened his eyes and realized it was already daylight. He remembered looking up wood manufacturing last night, but had fallen asleep without even realizing it. He checked the time. It was 7 a.m. He couldn't remember the last time he woke up that early. He walked over to his computer and saw that everyone in the game was already up and working. It hit him that the villagers really did live in real time. He started thinking about what kind of prophecy he should give them next, but his thoughts were interrupted by the growling of his stomach. He realized he was hungry and remembered he hadn't eaten dinner last night because he'd been so focused on the game. Glancing around, he saw the empty snack wrappers, realizing even those were finished. So, he went downstairs, wondering if there was anything left in the fridge. As he approached the kitchen, he heard the voices of his family having breakfast at the dining table. Ever since the incident with his younger sister, he'd had a huge argument with his father about finding a job, and they hadn't spoken directly since. For a moment, he thought about going in, greeting them with a smile, and asking if he could join them for breakfast, but then he found the idea ridiculous. They were all eating to fuel themselves for the day ahead, working hard, while he had no job and nothing to show. How could he face them like that? Instead, he turned around, went back to his room, and started doing some muscle exercises. He remembered how he had run away that time and felt the need to counter the weakness he still carried inside. While training, he glanced at his computer screen and noticed Carol working alongside the others. They all seemed happier than him, even though it was just a game. He thought to himself that, despite it being virtual, they were living more fulfilling lives than he was. Feeling guilty, he decided to warn them not to put too much faith in an incompetent god like him. So he wrote the prophecy of the day. Chem announced they had received the prophecy and the villagers gathered around her, excited to hear it. After she read it, there was a heavy silence. The boy grew anxious, wondering if they were disillusioned with their god, who seemed to be making excuses. He regretted giving them that message, but then Chem broke the silence, praising how wonderful it was that their god was still watching over them. Rhodas added that perhaps their god had lost powers because of his battles against the devils. They had taken the prophecy positively, and his fate points increased to 110. He realized the points were increasing too slowly. At that rate, he wouldn't be able to provide them with a better life anytime soon. He overheard them talking about how uncomfortable it was to sleep in the wagon, and how they needed a defense wall or fence to protect themselves from monsters. Listening to their struggles, he wished he had more fate points to help them, but he couldn't afford to waste the few he had. The only way to earn more fate points was through the in-game payment system. He had already listed his unopened items for sale and expected to get 20 to 30,000 yen from them. He looked at his books and considered selling them to a store to get more cash. The problem was he hadn't gone outside in months, but he knew if he didn't make these sacrifices, these villagers could be utterly defeated, and he wouldn't be able to play the game again. After thinking through everything, he decided to go outside. He put on some better clothes, realizing they fit him well even though he hadn't gained any weight. As a kid, he had imagined growing into a more refined adult in his 30s, thinking it would happen naturally. Now he promised himself he'd continue the game tomorrow. Just as he was about to leave, he saw Carol in the game fall and injure herself. It made him sad to see her struggle. Despite her injury, she gathered her wood sticks and kept walking. He also noticed that everyone in the game looked tired, realizing today was tougher than usual for them. Determined, he grabbed his bag of books and thought to himself that he'll do his best too. As he approached the door, his mom, surprised, asked if he was heading out and wondered what was going on. He simply said he'd be back soon. He took his bicycle and hit the road. People stared at him oddly, judging him as he passed. Thinking of the villagers in his game, he pedaled faster and soon reached the bookstore. Once inside, he looked around, wondering if he could find any book that might help him with managing villagers. He noticed a book about different worlds but realized it didn't match exactly the game's situation. Plus, he couldn't afford to buy something new. After selling his old books, he stepped outside and saw a bakery he used to visit with his family. He decided to go in and look at the desserts. He bought 4 puddings and headed back home. When he handed them to his mom, she smiled and asked if they were for her. He said he got enough for everyone and quickly rushed to his room, feeling a little embarrassed. He thought to himself that he shouldn't feel so proud for doing just one small nice thing, wondering what he was doing with his life at his age. After spending 20,000 yen, he finally had the 310 fate points. He watched as the villagers cooked dinner and sat together. He wondered what kind of miracle he should use next. There was a feature that allowed him to review their past conversations, but he felt uneasy about it, thinking it might be like eavesdropping. Still, he decided to test it out. When he clicked on it, he could suddenly hear their conversations from earlier in the day while he was away. They were talking about how nice the weather was, and Layla mentioned wanting to bathe in the river. Chem, however, pointed out that there were many men around. Layla winked and joked that she wasn't too worried about being seen since both her husband and daughter were used to it. She also teased that Gams wouldn't be interested in the body of an old lady like her. She added that Carol wouldn't mind if Gams saw her either, so it was all fine. After hearing this, he thought that maybe he didn't need to worry too much about Layla or Carol, but Chem's brother complex was definitely more serious than he expected. Suddenly, he read that Layla was wondering about the swarm of monsters that had attacked their village, mentioning how the villagers were scattered in the blink of an eye. Yoshio was confused, wondering what day she was talking about. As he continued to listen to their conversation, he realized they were referring to a village made of magnificent stone. Curious, he gathered more information and discovered that there had been once almost 100 villagers. After the monster attack, they were all forced to flee, each escaping on horse-drawn wagons, much like the ones they were traveling in now. That's when he understood the purpose of the miracle, Reunite Villagers. It was meant to bring together those villagers who had escaped and been separated. Just as he was thinking about reuniting them, his mother called out, telling him that dinner was ready. He went to the dining room and noticed his father sitting at the table. It was unusual to see him home this early. Ever since he became a NEET, they only saw each other face to face a few times each month. He tried to start a conversation, but his father didn't seem interested in talking. Instead, his father asked if Sayuki, his younger sister, was working overtime. Unlike him, Sayuki was hardworking and had successfully entered the field she wanted. She often said that working late didn't bother her at all. Their mother then mentioned that she had received some handmade tsukemono from Okiku and asked if he wanted to try some. She explained that the weather was nice, so she took a short walk in the park where she ran into Okiku, and afterward they went shopping together. Okiku was an elderly landlady who lived in a large old house nearby. When he was a child, she would often bring them candy. He realized that the only reason he wasn't kicked out of the house despite being in need was because his father worked hard and had a stable income. After finishing his meal, he thanked his parents and stood up. His mother told him to take a pudding with him and asked his father if he would like some dessert too, mentioning that their son had bought it for them. His father, sounding uninterested, replied that he would have some. Feeling disappointed, he went back to his room and started checking on the villagers in the game. He noticed that everyone except Gams had gone to the horse wagons. Gams stood out as a dependable figure with quiet strength, much like his own father. Chem could use healing magic, but she wasn't suited for battle, so both she and the villagers relied heavily on Gams. There was an option to summon more people, but it cost too many points. There was a cheaper alternative to summon a random person, but it felt risky. What if the random person turned out to be a criminal or someone dangerous? He decided it was wiser not to take that gamble. He also wanted to save points for a familiar, so he figured it was better to hold off on something. Realizing how much stress this game was causing him, he thought it would be best to sleep and figure things out tomorrow. Just as he was about to get up from his chair, a notification suddenly popped up. Attack. He quickly alerted everyone to wake up. Chem, sounding stressed, asked what was happening. Gams told her that monsters were attacking and warned everyone not to leave the wagon under any circumstances. Rhodus told his wife and daughter to stay inside the wagon because it was a dangerous situation. Gams, staying calm, reassured everyone that he would handle it and asked Chem to be ready to use her healing magic if needed. Yoshio felt incredibly stressed. The area was too dark for him to see the monsters, and he didn't know where they were. Suddenly, 2 stray dogs appeared. Yoshio knew Gams was strong, but it was 2 against 1, and he became even more anxious. He considered using a miracle for help, but before he could act, the monsters attacked Gams. Gams fought back fiercely with a sword and managed to kill both of them. After the fight, Gams sat on a log, exhausted. His sister ran toward him with a smile, asking if he was okay, but suddenly, Gams collapsed, and everyone froze in shock. Yoshio shouted his name, realizing it hadn't been a flawless victory. His sister began crying, holding him in her arms. She was panicking, shouting that Gams' body was getting cold. Meanwhile, outside the screen, Yoshio was trying to figure out what was happening. Rhodus checked his pulse and tried to calm her down. He noticed bite marks on Gams' arm, realizing that the monster bite had poisoned him. Rhodus asked Chem if she could use antidote magic. Yoshio started to relax, thinking her healing magic would fix everything. But then Chem said she hadn't learned antidote magic yet. Desperately, Rhodus asked if there were any antidotes in their supplies, but Gams shook his head, indicating they had none. Carol stood in shock, unable to believe what was happening. Chem, crying, started begging her brother not to leave her. In her desperation, she shouted at God, pleading for help to save her older brother and promising she would do anything. Yoshio panicked, unsure of what to do. If Gams died, everything would be over, and he wondered if there was anything he could do. Clenching his fists, he tried to calm himself, reminding himself that he was the god in this game. He remembered there was an option to reverse the situation and frantically searched for it. Instead, he found a miracle called Traveling Doctor Shows Up, which costs 300 fate points. He hesitated, debating whether to use it. What if the doctor didn't arrive in time? It was a gamble. He started shouting in frustration, worried about the outcome. Suddenly, his mom yelled from downstairs, telling him to quiet down. Realizing how loud he had been, he thought that even if a doctor did show up in the middle of the night, it might seem suspicious to the villagers. After thinking it over for a moment, Yoshio decided to use the miracle. A traveling doctor suddenly appeared in the village. Chem, shocked and angry, demanded to know who he was. The doctor calmly told them not to worry and introduced himself as a traveling physician. Yoshio smiled, thinking it was natural for them to be suspicious of him. To ease their concerns, he revealed a prophecy, and Chem, surprised by a prophecy coming so late at night, read it with heartfelt gratitude toward God. The doctor then asked to examine Gams, and everyone watched anxiously. He pulled out an antidote and applied it to Gams' wound. Slowly, Gams began to feel better. His pain faded, and his body temperature returned to normal. Everyone was relieved and happy to see Gams recovering. Yoshio, feeling much more relaxed, even wondered whether the doctor was male or female. Meanwhile, Rhodus began reading the prophecy aloud. In it, Yoshio had explained how he guided the doctor to them and reminded them that, although their struggles would continue, they should never forget that their god was watching over them. Yoshio, trying to sound like a true god, wondered how it came across. Seeing the villagers' happy expressions, he felt reassured that he had done a good job. The next day, the girls were gathering ingredients for food while Rhodus was practicing with a sword to protect everyone. Suddenly, a rabbit rustled through the bushes, and the noise startled Rhodus, causing him to fall down. Meanwhile, the doctor was busy preparing herbs for Gams' treatment. Suddenly, Chem asked the doctor why he came this way, and he explained that his family had been doctors for generations, and this place called the Forbidden Forest was full of monsters, but also rich in herbs. The previous night, after finishing gathering herbs and preparing to set up camp, he saw a bright light in the distance. At first, he wasn't sure if he should go towards it, but eventually, he decided to follow the light. Chem smiled and said it must have been God's guidance. The doctor replied that while they valued nature above all and didn't particularly believe in God, it could have been an act of God. Yoshio realized that the doctor was agnostic. He acknowledged the possibility of God's existence, but didn't fully believe in it. Chem asked the doctor if he would be leaving soon. The doctor replied that he couldn't abandon his patient, even though the worst part was over. He then asked if they would allow him to stay a bit longer, as he had some time to spare. With a big smile, Chem agreed, saying he could stay as long as he liked. However, she mentioned that they didn't have any proper shelter at the moment and asked if he was okay with that. Yoshio smiled, thinking it was good that the doctor would stay with them, but he also realized the issue. Since the doctor was there, the wagon was now full, so someone would have to sleep outside. Even though Gams was saved, it would still take a few days for him to fully recover. Yoshio then thought that they needed a safe place to live, so he began considering how to use his fate points wisely. Suddenly, the doctor mentioned that there was a cave nearby, a ruin left by miners. He said it would provide shelter from the wind and rain, and they might even find some leftover tools there. Yoshio was relieved to hear that the doctor knew of such a place. Rhodus, excited, asked the doctor to lead them to the cave. Yoshio noticed that the cave was only about 5 minutes away from where they were, so they could easily return later to gather more wood if needed. They finally arrived at the cave and saw a large door in front of them. The doctor mentioned that this door was likely used for transporting goods, as it seemed to be the main entrance. Yoshio thought it must have been a mining area. When they opened the door, they were greeted by a massive space inside. Everyone looked thrilled. Yoshio was also surprised. It was much larger than he had expected. Although it was a bit dirty, there were several rooms scattered around. He noticed that everyone was so absorbed in exploring their new home that they weren't paying attention to the doctor. Chem had placed Gams on the bed and held his hand, telling him that they had safely arrived in a new land. There was also spring water flowing nearby, and there were areas for cooking. The girls were ready to start cleaning the place. Yoshio felt eternally grateful to the doctor for helping them find a place to stay. While the doctor continued treating Gams, Chem went outside and asked everyone to be quiet so they wouldn't wake him. She suggested that they clean the area so that Gams would be surprised when he woke up. Layla told Rhodus to take out anything that was useless, and he agreed, saying he would put these items in the corner. While cleaning, Carol suddenly noticed that there were 4 rooms. With a smile, she shouted that she would make Big Brother Gam's room hers, saying one bed would be enough because she would sleep with her. Chem, watching her from behind, wondered why Gams would share his room with Carol instead of her. She thought to herself that Gams had spoiled Carol a little too much. Yoshio was a bit concerned about the relationship between Carol and Chem, but he figured they generally got along well as fellow villagers. He then thought about how they could finally start building a village now that they had the potential to turn the cave into a livable place. He noticed it was already noon and realized he hadn't eaten anything yet. Feeling hungry, he decided to grab something to eat. Just as he left his room, he suddenly saw his sister Sayuki coming out of hers as well. He was shocked and asked Sayuki if she was on holiday. She replied that she wanted to go downstairs to eat and angrily told him to move aside. He told her that he was going to the first floor too, but she warned him not to use the bathroom there. Hearing that made him even angrier, but since that incident, she had never acted the same way towards him. He didn't say anything, but just assured her that he wouldn't use it. After eating, he returned to his room, thinking about his sister. He remembered how friendly they used to be, often going out to relax together. He wondered if they would still be close siblings if that incident hadn't happened. He felt a pain in his stomach, realizing he had to move on, because even though he felt regret now, he knew there was nothing he could do about it. He then decided to check on the villagers and noticed they had cleaned the place very well. Rhodus asked Layla where Chem was, and she replied that Chem was checking in on Gams. Carol said she wanted to go there too, but Rhodus told her to leave them alone for a while. With a smile, he suggested that she stay with her dad and join him on an expedition to the cave. She agreed, saying that once her big brother got better, she would give him a tour. Meanwhile, Chem entered the room and asked the doctor if she could take care of her brother, urging him to rest. The doctor agreed, saying the symptoms from the poison had settled down and she would accept Chem's offer. She told Chem to summon her immediately if something unusual happened. Chem thanked the doctor and held her brother's hand, letting him know that she was there. Yoshio felt happy to see that Gam's condition was improving. Suddenly, a dream box appeared above Gams. He clicked on it and the screen changed completely. Suddenly, the scene changed, then Yoshio saw a younger Gams. He was surrounded by a whole squad of friends who were inviting him to go out for drinks. Gams politely declined, saying he was heading home because his sister was waiting for him. Yoshio was shocked to see Gams during such an innocent time in his life. When Gams finally reached home, he found his father drinking heavily. Annoyed, Gams remarked that he was drinking again and threw a bottle at him. He then handed his father a pot of coins, which he had promised in exchange for watching over Chem while he was working. Gams asked where Chem was and went downstairs, only to find her lying in a bad condition. He was shocked and asked how many days she had gone without food. Yoshio felt the same shock, wondering if this was child abuse. Gams grew angrier, saying he should have left this place sooner. He started to walk away when his father tried to stop him. The father claimed that he was just careless because he was drunk and assured Gams that he would keep his promise from now on. But Gams picked up his sister and angrily told his father to move aside unless he wanted to die. Gams then went out of the house and Chem asked him where they were going. He replied, "Anywhere but home." She pointed out that if they didn't hurry, their father would really be angry. Gams told her that they wouldn't see him ever again, so there was no need to be scared. Chem then said maybe their mother and father hated her because she was a bad girl and always got scolded. But Gams shouted that that wasn't true. They were the bad ones. He reminded them of the time their parents said they would sell Chem because she was bad and useless, so at least she would be of some use in the end. Yoshio realized they were living in a much worse situation than he had imagined. Gams told Chem not to think of them as her parents anymore, but he promised to take care of her and asked her to live with him, have fun together, be happy. Chem smiled and hugged him, saying that she loved her big brother. Now the screen returned to the present time, and Yoshio realized why Chem had a big brother complex. With such a cool brother, it made sense that she would depend on him. Suddenly, Gams opened his eyes and asked if he had worried his little sister. Tears streamed down Chem's face as she hugged him, relieved to see him speaking. Everyone else appeared at the door, happy to see Gams awake. Yoshio also felt a sense of relief, thinking that finally they were all happy. He knew that everyone depended on Gams. He was a character who would naturally be popular. On top of that, he was handsome and strong. Yoshio was sure that the bond between Chem and Gams would never weaken from now on. As he thought about his own relationship with his sister, he suddenly noticed tears streaming down his face. He was shocked to realize he was crying. He laughed a little, wondering if he regretted things so much that it made him cry. He thought to himself that he really wanted to change. From his windows, he saw his dad and sister walking away together. As they left the house, she asked him if he was wearing the necktie she had given him. Her dad smiled and asked if it looked strange. She smiled back, telling him that it suited him very well. After watching them leave, he walked over to his computer and saw Layla preparing meals with Carol's help, while the doctor and Gams were out on patrol. He looked around, feeling happy to see that they'd all set up the necessary equipment and furnishings for comfortable living. It had been 3 days since they moved into the cave and their way of life improved dramatically. He felt it was worth using that miracle. Meanwhile, Gams had faced a large boar in front of him. The boar charged at him, but Gams dodged the attack. Suddenly, an arrow struck the boar, knocking it out. The archer who fired the arrow was none other than the Dr. Mullis. Mullis walked over to Gams and reminded him not to push himself too hard while he was still recovering. Yoshio checked the doctor's name and noticed that there was no background information except the name, Mullis. Not only was he skilled at making potions, but he was also a master archer, making him a great partner for Gams. Additionally, Mullis could use magic to manipulate plants, and he was the one who had led them to the cave. Yoshio hoped Mullis would join the village permanently, but under the doctor's background info, there was only a box labeled secret and nothing more. Yoshio thought it was strange that Mullis hadn't joined the group yet, especially after he'd already spent 30,000 yen on the game. He realized that this game wasn't as straightforward as he initially thought. Afterward, they returned to the cave where Chem thanked them for the patrol. Carol excitedly welcomed them home. Gams and Mullis handed over the boar meat they had just hunted, and Layla was thrilled to know that they'd be having meat for dinner. However, she pointed out that they were running low on seasoning and salt, which were essential for cooking and preserving the meat. Yoshio found this concerning. He realized that even though the area around the cave had an abundance of natural crops, they still needed a stable food source, like a farm. He thought about calling a peddler to buy seeds and supplies. However, there is also a miracle called Golem that caught his attention. Golems were massive humanoid creatures made of rock, and he could control one directly with his controller, which was really exciting for him. But the cost of summoning a golem was 700 fate points, which equaled to 70,000 yen in real money. As a NEET, Yoshio found it impossible to afford that much, especially since he had only accumulated 160 points so far. He earned 10 points daily from the villagers, meaning that it would take him 2 to 3 months to gather enough points. He thought about how he had already used up his savings in the game. Watching how the villagers enjoy their dinner happily, Yoshio felt a bit more relaxed. He stood up from his chair to make a cup of coffee for himself, feeling a mix of contentment and worry. After making his coffee, Yoshio returned with the cup in hand and watched the villagers working. He noticed that Chem and Gams had been working on something together for the past few days, and he wondered what they were making. Chem then said it was almost done and asked Gams if it looked disrespectful. They revealed what they had been working on. It was a statue. Gams reassured Chem, saying that what truly mattered were their feelings, and he was certain their thoughts were reaching God, who is also watching over them. Mullis asked if it was a statue of God, and Chem confirmed it, explaining that although the craftsmanship was rough, they needed a place to worship or make offerings. Yoshio realized it was a statue for him, but because it was carved so crudely, it was difficult to tell if it depicted a male or female figure. He then wondered about the gender of the god of fate. As Chem offered some fruits to the statue, the offerings disappeared before them. Yoshio realized that since God existed in their world, offerings vanishing wasn't particularly surprising. He also noticed that his fate points had increased as a result of the offering. When he read the instructions, he saw that offerings made to him also contributed to raising his fate points. Yoshio decided to talk with the villagers about offering things they didn't need, but he didn't want to burden them or come across as forceful, so he revealed a prophecy to them, suggesting they could offer unnecessary items to him, explaining that he could turn their goods and thoughts into miracles. He was pleased with how he phrased it, as it didn't come off as begging or demanding. The villagers seemed happy as they read the message, their faces lighting up with smiles. Yoshio, however, felt a bit concerned about their innocence. He thought to himself that in modern Japan, people like them might easily fall for scams or join dubious religions. Then again, he realized that they might already be involved in something similar without knowing it. The next day, Yoshio saw Gams and Rhodus offering a large log to him. He realized that they could offer even big items like that, and it struck him how happy they seemed while making offerings to their god. As the villagers prayed and gave their offerings together, he noticed it was already past noon. Time had flown by while he played the game. Suddenly, his mom called out, saying he had received the parcel. He went downstairs and saw it was from the Village of Fate. Thinking it might be some reference material they forgot to send earlier, he mumbled to himself. His mom, curious about what he was saying, opened the parcel before he could stop her. Yoshio told her not to open it so casually, wondering what could it be. When she opened it, they found strange-looking fruits inside. They resembled pears but were red like apples. Yoshio couldn't believe his eyes. These were the exact fruits the villagers had offered him the day before. His mom, thinking they were some exotic fruits he ordered, said they'd eat them for dessert that evening. He caught the scent of the fruits, noticing a faint citrus aroma. It didn't seem artificial at all. Remembering how the villagers enjoyed them, he decided to take a bite. To his surprise, it was the most delicious fruit he'd ever tasted. He figured it might be a thoughtful touch from the game's creators, possibly just a common fruit in some foreign country. Either way, he wasn't complaining since he got to enjoy something so tasty. Feeling satisfied, he returned to his computer and wrote a new prophecy for the villagers. In it, he thanked them for the fruits and assured them that they didn't need to offer food unless they had extra. He reminded them to prioritize themselves first. Smiling, he thought about how once he saved up enough points to obtain a golem, he'd be able to help them even more. Suddenly, his mother shouted for him to come downstairs, and from her tone, he could tell she was a bit irritated. He hurried down and saw a log at the door stamped with the symbol of the Village of Fate. His mother asked what he was planning to do with it, but he was completely stunned. It was the same log the villagers had offered him the day before. He thought to himself, that joke was going too far. He tried to drag the log but quickly realized how heavy it was. His mother asked what he planned to do with it, so he told her he was going to move it to the garden, pretending she had asked him to use it for muscle training. As she struggled with the weight, he thought about how hard Gams and Rhodus must work with such heavy labor. He couldn't take the situation seriously at all and thought about filing a complaint with the game company. However, when he checked the details, he couldn't find a contact number. The return address said Hokkaido, which shocked him. He couldn't believe they would go so far as to send something like that from Hokkaido. He searched online for information about the company but found nothing. He even looked up the address from the package on his laptop and found a small building, which made him doubt that such a tiny company could produce a game of this quality. He started thinking that the actual development might have taken place somewhere else, but the company was so secretive. Either way, he couldn't afford to travel there, and he didn't have the guts to confront them in person, so he sat there, wondering what he should do with the log. The next day, he received the cooler from the villagers, and inside was fresh meat from a monster they had killed. He was completely shocked, and his mom was just as surprised when she saw it. She angrily asked if he was spending money on something shady. Unsure of how to explain, he tried to tell her that he had come up with an idea to help revitalize a village, and the villagers appreciated it so much that they started sending him gifts regularly. To his surprise, she got excited and thought it was amazing, and he was even more shocked that she believed him. He handed her the boar meat and suggested she cooked it. She stared at the meat, baffled, and wondered how on earth she could prepare something like that. Since then, he started receiving daily packages from the Village of Fate. These included various fruits, monster meats, and even crystals used as light sources in the game. He also kept getting more logs, and he wondered if it was possible to buy these items from somewhere, but he had a theory. Maybe this game was designed for wealthy people, where valuable items were gradually sent as tributes to players. Perhaps he had been selected as a test player by mistake. One evening, his mom made a sauté dish with the meat they'd received. As they sat at the dinner table, she asked if he could get more of those fruits because she felt healthier after eating them. He told her that he would ask the villagers about it. She mentioned that even Sayuki liked the meat. His dad chimed in, saying the meat was really delicious with a more natural flavor than what they usually buy from stores. He added that the meat had a texture and taste that made it feel like real quality meat. Seeing his dad talk about it so much reassured Yoshio that he truly enjoyed the food, as it was rare for his dad to speak so enthusiastically. The next day, he was in the garden trying to cut wood with a saw. His father watched as he struggled, finding it really difficult. His dad offered to show him how to do it properly. He suspected his father was helping him because he didn't want the neighbors to see him struggling and get embarrassed. After demonstrating, his father handed the saw back and told him to try again. From that point on, his father started giving him advice regularly, and last weekend, they even made plans together to use the logs to repair the garden fence. He also began thinking about how he could teach the villagers to cook meat. His mother had taught him a lot about cooking, so he had become somewhat decent at it. It had even become a routine for him to have lunch together with the villagers. In the evening, while he was looking for something in the fridge, his sister suddenly came home. Hesitantly, he greeted her, and she was surprised to hear him speak, replying that she was glad to be back. Sitting in his room later, he reflected on how he was able to talk to his family more now, all thanks to the Village of Fate. He began to wonder if he was helping the villagers or if they were actually helping him. Meanwhile, Gams had also built a fence around the cave to ensure their safety. After building the fence, Chem asked her brother if monsters could jump over it. He reassured her, saying not to worry. If any did get over, he and Mullis would handle them. He added that the only real issue was the number of enemies like last time, so there was no point in stressing about it. He then suggested they head inside. Yoshio thought that they seemed more confident about their defense now, but he noticed something was off. They all appeared more tense, even though their situation should have improved. They were trying to act calm, but their restlessness was clear. He also noticed everyone sighed when they looked at the wooden calendar. The last day of the month was marked, and he wondered if something special was set to happen on that day. Everyone was having dinner when Carol asked why everyone looked so gloomy. Rhodus told her that Mama and Papa were doing well and were always affectionate with each other, but she pointed out that everyone sighed whenever they looked at the calendar. Rhodus admitted that they didn't want her to worry, then asked if she remembered how they always told her to stay inside on the last day of the month and go to bed early. She nodded and saying that she remembered because the adults always had really scared faces and got easily angry on that day. She then wondered aloud, if there are so many gods, why is it only the 7 gods, and why are there 12 months in a year? Shouldn't there be 5 more gods? Rhodus smiled at how observant she was and explained that the 7 gods were originally responsible for the 7 days of the week, representing light, moon, fire, water, nature, lightning, and earth. Yoshio realized that their world had a similar system with their Monday to Sunday linked to those elements. He understood the system of their gods better now, realizing that he was one of those gods who followed one of the 7 gods. This helped him grasp the purpose of his position a little more clearly. He learned that there had been conflicts among the gods, leading to a massive battle. The first 31 days of this battle were marked by devastating freezing winds. On the 120th day, the god of nature emerged as the strongest. On the 182nd day, the gods of water and lightning fought fiercely against each other. Then, on the 243rd day, the god of fire exploded with rage. It took a full 365 days for the gods to stop fighting. As a result of this long conflict, the faction of the gods that emerged victorious came to this world. Those gods became responsible for the 7 days of the week, and the periods during which they thrived, they were known as the 7 chief gods. She asked what happened to the gods who lost, and Rhodus explained that the defeated gods were considered evil and banished to the depths of the earth. However, they continued to gather strength and reappeared once a month, lending their powers to monsters. This event occurred on the last day of the month, known as Evil God's Temptation. Chem added that this was why it was dangerous to go outside on that final day. The monsters' powers grew, turning them wicked. Yoshio finally understood why there was a cross marked on the last day of the month. He noticed there were 10 days left until that marked day, just like in the real world, where it was November 20. In the game, it was also the 20th date, with 10 days remaining until the end of the month. He thought about how, with the amount of fate points he currently had, he probably wouldn't be able to protect the villagers. It was already midnight, and he saw that Rhodus was sitting alone at the table. Layla appeared and asked him what was wrong. He told her that he couldn't stop thinking about Evil God's temptation. He mentioned the same attack from last time and expressed his worry about losing his family. Seeing Rhodus tremble so much, Yoshio wondered what had happened during the last Evil God's temptation. 3 weeks ago, Carol was sleeping in her bed when she suddenly woke up and ran to find her mom and dad. They were working in the kitchen and her mom asked her to wash her face. She went to the well and started washing her face, finding it refreshing. She forgot to bring a towel and suddenly Chem appeared and asked if she had just woken up. Carol agreed and asked where their big brother was. Chem told her he was keeping watch at the village gates. Carol ran away, saying that if Big Brother wasn't there, she didn't care. Chem didn't like that, but when she saw Carol running, she tried to stop her. Carol went back to her home and asked if she had heard Chem's voice. Chem told her she didn't know and then started eating breakfast. After finishing her meal, Carol ran outside. Her mom asked where she was going, and Carol replied that she was going to find her big brother. Her mother tried to stop her, but Carol ran off without listening. As she made her way through the market, she greeted the people around her. Someone asked if Rhodus and Layla were home, and she answered them before running away. Suddenly, she saw a big wall and finally spotted Gams nearby. She ran towards him and hugged him tightly. Gams told her she shouldn't be out there that day. Curious, she asked why, and he explained that it was a special day and pointed out that no other kids were around. She agreed and asked him if he had built the big wall. He shook his head and said that there had been a massive war several decades ago, and this site served as a stronghold. After the war, refugees moved in and prospered in that town, and she wondered if the walls protected them from enemies, and Gams agreed, just as her mom appeared. Her mom told her and asked her to stop running. A soldier approached Gams and asked if he knew them. Gams replied that they were their neighbors and had always been kind to him and his sister. The soldier's subordinate pointed out that the children didn't seem to have the slightest fear. Gams explained that ever since the town was established, it had been a fact that these walls have never been breached. Layla apologized for her daughter's interruption and said she would scold her later, but Gams urged her to be a bit more moderate. After that, they moved on from there. After reaching home, Carol asked if something special was happening that day, like a festival. Layla told her that it would have been nice if it was a festival, but they could have a feast tomorrow instead. Carol was happy to hear that. Then Rhodus and Layla exchanged worried glances. Rhodus, looking out the window, said he had packed everything in the wagon just in case. Layla nodded her head and Rhodus added that it would be great if nothing happened, praying that they could get through the day without any problems. Outside there were many monsters, much more than usual, and this time different types had formed a group, all attacking at once. Gams and his subordinates were fighting back, shooting at the monsters with spears and arrows. One of Gam's subordinates ordered everyone to follow Gam's lead, stressing that they must not let the monsters enter the town. But suddenly a monster leaped over the wall and attacked a soldier. Everyone was shocked, and soon more monsters began jumping over the wall and into the city. Chaos erupted throughout the village, and inside their home, Rhodus, Layla, and Carol stood together, frightened, hugging each other tightly as the situation spiraled out of control. Suddenly, Gams and his sister appeared at their home, asking if everyone was all right. They confirmed that they were fine, and Gams told them not to worry. Both he and his sister were covered in blood. Him from fighting monsters and Chem from healing injured people. Rhodus asked how the battle was going and Gams admitted it wasn't looking good and seemed hopeless. He explained that the gates had been breached and a swarm of monsters were flooding into town. He thought that it might be best to get his family and his sister to safety. Gams urged them to flee, and Rhodus, standing with determination, informed him that the wagon was ready with several boxes of supplies. They all climbed into the wagon while Gams provided protection. As the wagon started moving, some monsters appeared, and Gams quickly told Rhodus to get back on the wagon. He struck down the monsters swiftly and joined them on the wagon as it sped off. Gams informed them that a portion of the town's northwestern wall had collapsed, so they might be able to escape through there. Rhodus was shocked to see the entire town engulfed in flames, with destruction everywhere. Tears streamed down his face as he watched their once beautiful town in ruins. After they escaped from the town, Carol asked her mother if they would be able to return home. With sadness, her mother replied that they probably couldn't, but assured her that new experiences awaited them in other places. Chem smiled and said she was certain they survived thanks to divine protection, adding that the god of fate was guiding them. Later on that day, a courier arrived at Yoshio's house and handed him a small parcel. In the present, Rhodus was working hard on improving his fighting skills, with Gams teaching him. However, sometime Gams told Rhodus that he wasn't suited for battle and advised him to leave the front line fighting to him and Mullis. Sadly, Rhodus admitted that he thought any extra strength would help, but now realized that he didn't know his limits. He apologized to Gams for taking up his time, and Yoshio observed that Gams was quite strict. After dinner, Layla mentioned they were running low on fruit and asked Gams if he could gather some during his patrols and bring them back. Carol excitedly raised her hand, saying she wanted to join and help him too. Rhodus was a bit surprised by her enthusiasm. She explained that she hadn't been able to go outside since they moved to the cave. Rhodus reminded her that he had already told her before that, as the special day approached, monsters grew stronger and it became much more dangerous outside. But Carol smiled and said she would be fine with her big brother and would gather lots of delicious fruit. Hearing that, her father angrily slammed the table and scolded her, telling her to listen to what he was saying. Everyone was taken aback by his reaction, and Carol's eyes were filled with tears. Carol ran from the table, crying and shouting that she hated him before locking herself in a room. Yoshio observed Rhodus's behavior and reflected on his own helplessness. He thought that at best, all he could do was give the villagers hope through prophecy, but he knew that wouldn't solve their problems. With only 214 fate points, he considered using a miracle like summoning a group of hunters. However, it was risky since there was no telling what kind of personalities these hunters might have. The best option, he thought, was to summon a golem, because he would be able to control it, ensuring it wouldn't harm the villagers. But the problem was that he needed 700 points, and that there were only 10 days left. Yoshio briefly considered borrowing money, but he was too ashamed to ask his father or sister. He also wondered if he could sell the tributes he'd received from the villagers, but he knew it wouldn't be easy to sell them and get the money in such a short time. Yoshio was stressing over what to do when the idea of getting a part-time job crossed his mind. It seemed like the simplest solution, but the problem was he had never worked before. He remembered once going to a job interview, but his pride got in the way. He only wanted high-paying jobs with good perks, and in the end, he didn't land any position. His father had even tried using his connections to help him, but Yoshio ended up bringing shame to his family. It had been 10 years since then, and he had never worked a day in his life. Sometimes Yoshio thought about getting a job, but fear held him back. The fear of putting in effort and being rejected, but now, he didn't want to disappoint anyone anymore. As these thoughts weighed in on him, he realized it was time for a change. If he didn't change now, he might never change for the rest of his life. He began to wonder if he could find a job that would pay him at the end of the month, something that could help him gather enough money to support the villagers. However, finding short-term work was challenging in his area, and since he didn't have a driver's license, it made things even harder. He started thinking about the possibilities, but realized the obstacles made it difficult to find any immediate solution. Rhodus was trying to comfort Carol, but she refused to speak to him. Layla came in and gently suggested that he give her some space for a while. Watching their struggle, Yoshio felt the weight of their emotions. Determined to take action, he put on his jacket and decided that he needed a job magazine since he didn't want to rely on the internet. He grabbed his bicycle and rode out to pick up a magazine with job listings. When Yoshio returned home, his mother noticed and was happy to see him taking initiative. She welcomed him warmly and pleased that he had gone out. Yoshio hurried to his room, eager to look through the magazine for job opportunities. As he flipped through the pages, his mother called out that dinner was ready. He was downstairs and joined the family at the table for dinner. Yoshio noticed his sister had returned as well. She seemed surprised, asking if she wasn't supposed to be back, but he smiled and welcomed her warmly. She was a bit confused by his sudden friendliness. As they all sat down to eat, their mother unexpectedly announced that Yoshio was thinking about getting a job. Sayuki smiled awkwardly while their father commented, "So, you finally found some motivation?" Yoshio clarified that it was just a part-time job and he just needed a little cash. But his father responded, "The reason doesn't matter. It's good you're motivated now." Yoshio was surprised by this, as he had expected his father to insist on him only working full-time. Sayuki then teased him, saying he had changed lately and wondered if her big brother had gotten a girlfriend. Their mother laughed, joking that Yoshio didn't seem very popular, which made Yoshio wonder why his mom was answering for him. Yoshio noticed that Sayuki had called him big brother, and it made him happy. His father then asked if his decision to get a job was related to the village, surprising Yoshio with how sharp his father was. Yoshio admitted that it was, explaining that he felt it wasn't right to just keep receiving from the village without giving something back. Sayuki looked confused as she was the only one not following the conversation. Their mother reminded them it was bad manners to talk while eating and told them to finish their meal first. Sayuki agreed and asked her mother to explain everything after they were done. After dinner, Yoshio was sitting in the garden when his father came over and asked if he had found a job yet. Yoshio said he had found 3 possible options and would call them the next day. His father asked if he was looking for short-term work, and Yoshio confirmed, explaining that he had done some important business until the end of the month, so he could only work for a limited time. When his father asked if there were any specific requirements, Yoshio admitted that he wasn't good with customer service, so he was leaning towards jobs that involved physical labor. His father then offered to ask a friend for help, saying that no matter how old Yoshio gets, he would always be his father. There's no shame in getting help from family. Hearing this, Yoshio was reminded of the past when his father had tried to help him, but he had rejected those chances. His father then told him that if he really wanted to achieve something, he should use all the support he could get, even from his family. This advice made Yoshio think of Rhodus, who had tried to help Carol only to have her push him away, just like Yoshio had done once before. After thinking about it, Yoshio agreed with his father's advice. His father immediately called his friend to arrange something for Yoshio. Then he asked Yoshio to change into something more flexible. Yoshio mentioned he had a tracksuit, and his father told him to get ready and be back in 30 minutes. Yoshio was worried because he hadn't written his resume yet, but his father reassured him that it wasn't needed right away, since it was his friend helping out. Yoshio quickly went to his room, shaved, and changed all his clothes, all while worrying that he might disappoint his father again. Before leaving, he checked his computer to see what was happening in the village. He noticed that Rhodus looked frustrated and asked Layla if she needed help with anything. Layla thought about it for a moment and said that Carol had already taken care of everything. She explained that ever since they moved to the cave, Carol had been taking the initiative to help out, showing how much she had grown. Rhodus then went to Carol and apologized for getting angry. Carol smiled and told him that everyone knew how much he had cherished her, and that he only got mad because he wanted to protect her. Hearing Carol's words, Rhodus was shocked by how mature and understanding she had become. She went on to say that she wouldn't ask to go outside anymore. Rhodus responded, admitting that he was the one who was wrong. He explained that his fear of the evil god's temptation made him forget that they were in a new land, surrounded by their friends, and that they had chosen to live together. He realized they couldn't keep living in fear and isolating themselves. Yoshio was stunned by Rhodus' change in perspective. Rhodus then proudly declared that Carol was now a valuable member of the village and could make her own choices. He remarked that he trusted her completely. Everyone was happy to hear this, and Yoshio was watching from the outside. He smiled and held his face in relief. He silently thanked the game for giving him the courage to make a difference. Filled with happiness, he left, feeling joy in seeing all of his villagers happy. In the next scene, Yoshio sat in his dad's car as they drove to see his father's friend. Curious, he asked what kind of work it was. His father replied that it was cleaning duty at a supermarket. There was a shortage of staff for the night shift because one of the part-timers had recently quit. Hearing this, Yoshio wondered if this job would be a good fit for him. Finally, they arrived at their destination and his dad's friend greeted them from afar. He welcomed them warmly and complimented Yoshio, saying that he had a surprisingly fit body for someone who had been staying indoors for so long. Yoshio's dad then said goodbye, hoping that they'd get along well before leaving. Watching his dad walk away, Yoshio felt a bit startled, like a child who didn't want his dad to leave so quickly. Yoshio entered the supermarket and his dad's friend reassured him not to be so nervous. He explained that all Yoshio needed to do was follow instructions, and if there was anything he didn't understand, he could ask him or two other employees for help. His dad's friend introduced him to his coworkers and playfully asked them not to give him a hard time. The girl greeted him warmly, saying it was nice to meet him, while the boy commented on Yoshio's height, joking that it would make cleaning the fluorescent lamps easier than it was for him. Yoshio noticed how socially confident they both seemed, unlike him. He reminded himself that he was new and needed to set aside his pride and give his best effort. Bowing his head slightly, he said he hoped they could all get along well. After finishing his shift, Yoshio stood beside his dad's friend, the supermarket manager. The manager asked if he could come in at the same time tomorrow, and Yoshio assured him there was no problem. The manager confirmed that it would be another late-night shift and mentioned he'd pick him up at 8 p.m. As Yoshio was getting ready to leave, his co-workers said it was nice meeting him and looked forward to working together again tomorrow. As they left, Yoshio smiled, watching them walk away, feeling a bit more at ease. On his way home, Yoshio reflected on the tasks he'd completed, vacuuming, moving things around, and cleaning tools. He felt satisfied having calmed his nerves and completed his duties. It had been a long time since he moved his body like that, and it felt good. When he opened the door, he expected everyone to be asleep. He wanted to take a bath right away, but felt thirsty. As he entered the kitchen, he noticed a meal on the table with a note, "Great work. You must be hungry, right? Go ahead and eat up." He smiled, realizing it was from his mom. Grateful, he ate the meal, and after a hard day's work, it tasted even better. After finishing, he headed to the bathroom and saw that the hot water was ready and the tub was clean. He smiled again, knowing his mom had thought of him. As he relaxed in the tub, he silently thanked her, a smile spreading across his face. After his bath, Yoshio checked his computer and saw that all the villagers were asleep. He smiled, thinking that the reason he was able to push through the day was because of them. Watching them work tirelessly had motivated him. Feeling tired, he decided it was time to get some sleep too. When he woke up, he felt soreness in his muscles. He went downstairs and saw his mom, who greeted him warmly and offered to heat up lunch. As they sat at the table, she asked him how work had gone. While eating, Yoshio shared that everyone was nice to him and that he had to work the same shift again tonight. She was happy to see him putting in effort and asked how he liked last night's dinner. Yoshio told her it was delicious and thanked her for taking such good care of him. After finishing his meal and walking away, his mom called out that he had received another parcel. Curious, he opened it and found a ball of dirt inside. He immediately realized it must have come from Carol. The villagers believed they could only send him one tribute per day, but that wasn't true. They could actually send up to 2. However, Carol often sent things whenever she felt like it. Sometimes it was stones she gathered from the riverside, and other times it was shiny dirt balls known as Dorodango. Recently, she started carving blocks of wood and sending them regularly. Yoshio was excited to see what she would eventually create, as the consistent practice seemed to be improving her skills. He was eager to see how her work would develop over time. Yoshio glanced at his computer screen and saw Carol carve